Hey dudes, welcome back to another episode of our Rhomas Men's Team podcast. You are about to listen to one of our prior team meetings. If you ever want to join one of our live sessions that we have every Monday and Friday, head over to rhomas.com. That's RHOMAS.com and put your email in and we will send you a live link every time we record. We generally record on Mondays and Fridays. So if you ever want to be on the actual podcast, like we bring men up all the time to talk about their goals, talk about their obstacles, etc., head over to rhomas.com. And then also, if you want to help support the channel grow and also have access to exclusive content, book reviews, extra whiteboard sessions, etc., and some coaching sessions, head over to patreon.com and support us. We would love it. But if not, no biggie. We'll see you on the live sessions. Later, dudes. Enjoy this podcast.
We are live. Welcome, everybody, to another.
What's up?
What's up, bro?
What's up, buddy?
Chilling, man. I told you, I'm pumped.
I know, man. Let's hear it. Let's have it.
I got the video out. I got the meditation video I was trying to do. I was telling that was the discussion last week of like, well, part of the discussion was like, like when do you ship things out? When's right to do it? And I was just thinking before we started, it's like, I think what helps me now is identifying if I know specifically what I'm trying to change with something. Like there was like specific things that I needed to address before I put it out. But the thing that hangs, I think that you address is like, dude, get it to 80% and put it out. Is like sometimes you're just not putting it out because you're like, I hope I don't get judged for this thing. And it's like if you don't have a specific reason what's wrong with it, then I would agree with you, Wes. It's like throw something out, especially if you're not releasing anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was pumped, man. I finally, and again, we've talked about this before. You learn the best when you're trying to teach other people, man. Like
without a doubt.
Oh my God. And it's like, it sounds like, oh yeah, but like the reality of that is so crazy how much that applies. Cause like I couldn't figure out how to how to properly meditate, what it even was, what was the point of it. And then I thought I knew a lot. And then I started doing this video and it just opened my eyes up to a whole other dimension of it that I was like, oh fuck, I never even thought about this. Mm-hmm. So very pumped, dude, feeling good. My wife's back. She was gone. I was daddy daycare since Wednesday.
Nice.
So, yeah, man.
Yeah, I mean, to your point of teaching, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of men, identify themselves as dumb or, just not good at learning. There's a couple things there. Number one, I don't think school is a good example of whether or not you can actually learn. Because number one, the information is just jammed down your throat at an unbelievable pace. Like it's a crazy pace. And 95% of the stuff you're just not interested in. At least if you're like me or the other guy, all of our friends. And then because of those two reasons, you're not interested in most of the content, and it goes so fast that you eventually can learn that you can't learn. Like that, a lot of people teach themselves that, and it's just false. So that if you actually take your time and then you only select topics that you're actually interested in, and then you say, okay, well, I want to build a presentation to teach somebody else. This doesn't matter what the hell it is. Man, it's just such a good pathway to learn what you actually like to learn about.
Yeah, man. I mean, I want to toss it back out there again to people. If you have anything you're interested in, just set a date for yourself. Say, I'm going to come on here and present 20 minutes on X. Mm-hmm. Set a date, and you'll be surprised the fire it lights under you to like really retain it and have a clear understanding of it.
Oh, that'd be a cool idea if somebody came on here.
Yeah, man.
Like pick a topic and
anything.
Teach the guys.
Fucking anything. But yeah, I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, man. But dude, how's your weekend? How's everything going?
Everything's going great. The seminars, the classes, and everything, and all the meetings coming as a result from it are great. I don't want to say they're overwhelming because that sounds like a negative term, but it's like a good overwhelming. So much work has come from it. We'll see whether or not business comes from it because it takes kind of, a couple months to see if it plays through. That's kind of one of the bitchy part of it is you don't know, and you don't know for a while on whether or not it's going to work. So that's what we're testing. And yeah, man, it's keeping me super busy. How about you?
Dude, I mean, same thing. I have to and I encourage everyone to try to think like this. I've recently just started. It's like, I'm just thinking in terms of projects, and it's like, I'm going to finish this meditation series. I would say realistically, it'll probably take me another month or two. and maybe hopefully another month, we'll see. But once that's done, I'm going to get into the realm of, continuing. I'm doing stand-up a lot more. That's just, another thing I'm doing. But in terms of like the other stuff, just finish this like stuff, start seeing how I can talk to people in person, like just dip my, figure out how to get into that world. And at the same time, once I'm done the psych null stuff, I'm going a full immersion back into like my writing, like just writing every day and seeing what I can, just try to finish these books and all these other projects I have half open. I want to just finish every single project I have open right now, and then and then move from there. So
awesome.
So yeah, man. So I'm plodding along. I'm doing my thing, and at the same time, not losing sight of all the other stuff, because this is all about like holistic performance. So it's like still developing in all the other spheres of like relationships and like I called. I was talking to Butterly, and I just telling him straight up, is like, dude, I want to start planning like just like hanging out, formatting that to where, and he was just like, dude, that's the most autistic thing I've ever heard. But it's like just setting up shit that's fun. Like I don't do anything.
Yep.
It's like so.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's so it's like time to do that, and it all kind of cascades down, because it's like just bringing people around other people. Everyone's just feels a little better, and it's just going from there.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of being a guy is that we're relatively casual in the majority of our endeavors, and then our peers are relatively casual as well. But the downside of being relatively casual is then you don't get the upside of planning ahead, of putting effort into things, of like all these different types of things. So we get the benefit of a loose relationship where it's like, Matt, if you don't show up to one of my things, I don't care, right? Like, it's like, okay, Matt was busy. I'm not taking it personal. But part of that is because I didn't really put a lot of work into it to begin with, but there's probably somewhere to meet in the middle. Like, so planning out hangouts and actually putting some effort into it. And Butterly says it's autistic, but Butterly also bakes, apple pies. So he was just laughing. Yeah, he was just laughing. He was laughing. But it's like calling someone and be like, I think I want to work on my social life now. And they're like, all right, man. Oh, no, he's outstanding. That's what I'm saying. Like he's actually a great leader to look at when it comes to, putting effort into a social life.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, dude, also too, I will say Brit's like phenomenal. She'll get people's numbers. Like we'll be like just talking to people on the street. And she's like, what's your guys' number? We'll hang out. And I'm always like, what? I'm going to go to their house now? I'm like, what? You crazy? But yeah, either way, does anyone have anything? I always like to check in. Does anyone have anything, kind of any bugs in their crawl or anything in particular they're wrestling with or interested in or anything? I always like to throw it out there. All right.
Yeah. And in the meantime, if nobody comes up with something, I'd like to share maybe a little bit about how most people have a job, which is just, in exchange for money, usually a tiny bit of money, because when you just have a job, you don't get compensated very well. Some people have a career where there's actually some sort of trajectory and there's a pathway, so I can get from A to B to C. You get compensated, let's say mediocre, maybe average plus from that. And then very few people have a craft. When you become a true craftsman, that's when, in my opinion, you get compensated the most, because honestly, it's just a function of volume. When you're a crafts person, you work on the nights and weekends and in your brain time, free time on the craft, because you enjoy it so much. So it makes sense to reason that you would eventually get compensated. Now, there is a lag time in that compensation, if that makes sense. But the reason I'm saying that is, like, when you're a crafts person, you take the most micro detail and deconstruct it and try to perfect it. And the reason I'm saying this is because, like, this weekend, Friday night through Sunday, I spent so much time, and I'm not even like a quarter of the way through it, on reading about how to make an offer. So that's just one piece. Like, that's one sliver of business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Offer being. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. Yeah, that's just one thing people mostly gloss over.
Dude, and it's enormous. And an offer being, when you actually, like, let's say I've got a presentation, right? At the end of the presentation, I have an offer, and it's like, how do you construct a no-brainer offer so that people feel silly if they don't take it? Now, it's one of those topics where it sounds so obvious, like, oh yeah, like, just come up with a good offer. It's like, okay, let me see it. Let me see your offer, right? And it's like, and then all of the psychology behind it. So it's just very fascinating. And Matt, a couple things that I think that you would find interesting from a psychology standpoint is like just little tweaks. Like if you have the word but, where do you put the downside relative to the payoff? So for instance, so I could say to you, let's see, Matt, you know, you can lose 35 pounds, but it's going to take you a lot of work, right? So that there's one perception that way. Or I could say, hey, it's going to take a lot of work, but you're going to lose 35 pounds. Yeah.
True. Absolutely. Yeah. I think I think that's definitely, that's a real thing too. Cause you are kind of, you know, people, their feelings are fluctuating with everything.
Oh, without a doubt.
I mean, you can also just add another but. It's like, but you have to do it, but it's going to feel good. You'll eventually start to like it. You know,
dude,
so it's like,
see, that's the other thing that you just hit on, tonality, right? Tonality, voice fluctuation, cadence. And I'm serious. Like I have this written down in a spreadsheet, like how do I pitch it? What exact things do I put? And then also like bonuses, like you can have an offer, but then the psychology behind it's actually pretty fascinating. If you have an offer and then instead you cut it by 70%. So your baseline offer is 30% of the 100%. And then you bonus out the rest of the 70%, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I got you.
It's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. And then I look at myself. It's why we sit there and watch infomercials. Yeah. And we say like, oh, like you know what they're going to say next. But then you're like, hold on, wait, I get 2 Snuggies? I thought they were going to give me 1 Snuggie, but I get 2, you know, and they double the knife set, right? And I get a free like flashlight, and it's pretty wild.
True. No, absolutely. I wonder too, how do you, I think that people can try to abuse that too, and that can be kind of off-putting.
Without a doubt.
So it's like, and there's people too who like you were saying, you know, I feel like you have a very firm grasp on what you're in the terms of like your professional area. You're very dedicated to learning about it. You're obviously not just trying to like fuck people over. No, like you were saying, you're talking to strangers, and it's like, how much do you think just like sheer confidence comes into that when putting out offers?
Oh, so confidence really overrides any. It helps. Like put it this way, I'd rather have a person who's ridiculously convicted, because I would say it's like conviction first, and that it can appear like that eventually turns into confidence. Like I have so much conviction that what I do will help you. But I also can tell you that I've had that before, and just to the point where you have so much confidence, so much conviction, where I just tell somebody, it's like, no, like do this, trust me. Yeah. And in their head, they're like, I don't fucking know you. Right. Like, you know, but I'm like, no, seriously, trust me. Like, and then you can come off as egotistical. It's like, I swear to you, I'm better than anybody I've ever met at this thing. Doesn't mean that I'm the best in the world. I don't know, but I can tell you for sure that there's 0 people that I have met that come anywhere close to me in my craft. I promise you that. But even then they're like, okay. Right, like what does that have to do with me? You know, so it has to be articulated. But yeah, conviction and confidence play through a major role. And I can tell you that now, learning a lot of these things, yes, if you take it too far, you can come off like a dirtbag. But what I realize is like if I don't speak in certain language, right, like do certain things, they just don't hear it. They really just don't hear it. Yeah,
dude. What's funny too is like, the same thing applies to stand-up, because there's little tricks. You can throw your voice, you can kind of inflect certain words, and it kind of cues the audience to kind of laugh. But you get like, it's like just same thing. You get people who are like, who just try to take advantage of those little things, and eventually the audience catches on and go, oh, this person's just, you know, full of fucking shit. Right. So yeah, no, and I do agree though, and like you were saying, like if you are dedicated towards being like, you know, master of your domain, whatever that is, these little things cannot hurt at all. Like it's good to know these, good to know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, man, I like that kind of stuff. And it's kind of fascinating. I think it scares people too, because this kind of shows people how much of their thought process is going on outside of their awareness. And that's why they push back. Like, it doesn't work on me. And it's like, okay.
Oh, like, dude, it's very rational. Once you understand the like just baseline mechanics of how human beings work, it's extremely rational. So if I say, right, like, oh, by the way, like I've got a class coming up in 2 weeks, I will only accept 5 of you in this classroom just because it's a volume issue, which by the way, that's going to be true next time. I can't handle the amount of volume. So I will be selecting the top 5 potential clients. right? So now all of a sudden, right, there's competitive forces at play. There's a sense of scarcity. And then I've got a class coming up in 2 weeks. So I say, I will be making that decision in the next 10 business days. So now they have to prioritize, right, that schedule relative to the other things in their life. So it's extremely rational versus just an open-ended, like, oh, like, you know, if you ever want to come on board and work with us, then, you know, you can call me throughout eternity, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Like it 100% works, and it's 100% rational once you understand the underlying workings of the human mind. At least even at a novice level like I do. You don't have to be a master at, you know, neuroscience.
Dude, that's pretty sick, man. It always pumps me up when I just hear about the stuff you're doing outside of this, and like, you know, just doing the classes, doing the seminars, and just being like, sorry, bro, you didn't make this cut. Catch you on the next one.
Yeah,
It's like you said, it's a legitimate thing. You can't have too many people in it. You can't go super in depth with, you know, if you have too many people.
Nope. You cannot do it. And to be honest, like if you're building a business, like you don't want to build one that gives you handcuffs, you know, and you're chained to a thing you don't like.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't think any of us should really work with people we don't like unless you have to put food on the table. But once you're beyond that point, it's not worth it. Like there's no exchange of dollars that's worth making your life miserable.
Yeah, no, I can attest to that personally. It's just, you know, it's cool, you know, you'll get high for a second off of it, like, yeah, oh man, and then that just becomes your reality, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm curious. I'm just gonna float a little idea by you, and I think this kind of pertains to kind of some of the stuff we're talking about, but it's slightly different. So I'm thinking about before the end of next year, and again, I'm not like, you know, this is like not, I'm not asking you direct financial advice. This is a theoretical model for real estate stuff. So I told Brittany, I'm like, I do want to get a place. I don't know if I want to try to like get a place to Airbnb or like, you know, like it's kind of precarious with like renters now because like, you know, they just had like a moratorium on people paying rent, and it's like, you know, I'm also not really into like trying to, you know, like I get a place, the mortgage is $800 a month and I make $1,200, you know, $400 a month is cool and all, but I'd rather like get places I could buy and hold on to, and then like 3 years from now sell at a profit, you know, like just knowing like it's pretty low now, and like the trends in Philadelphia, things seem to be going up and up, but the landlord thing is kind of like it's just kind of precarious, and I personally don't like the model of it. It's like, I'm gonna get a place, the mortgage is $800, I'm gonna charge you $1,200 a month. And like, you know, we're gonna have this weird relationship where I'm just like someone you write a check to, and you know, you better not fuck my house up, but you totally can, and you could totally live in there and not pay me for 6 months, and like, it seems like the model stinks for such an intimate thing of like, hey, you're living in my house and blah blah blah. So then I pitched this to Brittany today. Actually, I'm doing some pitches too.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
So I pitched this to Brittany.
Urgency, scarcity, appeal to authority, social proof. Let's have it. Like all those things better be put in your pitch.
You tell me if they are. So I tell Brittany, I say, look, we're looking to get a house, so that way you don't get like slammed in taxes. The best thing is a tax haven, and then it'll probably accrue, and it'll most likely probably accrue in value. Like I don't think we'll lose money on this thing. And if I'm not using those words, I never said tax haven before. I don't know if that's an actual thing. So the idea is I'm gonna act. I used to work with guys who are getting out of prison and find them rentals. So I kind of have connections there where like you can get people and like they will pay the rent like for 6 months, it's guaranteed. But you get to like interview these guys, get to know them, all this stuff. So I kind of want to go through that program or find someone personally and say, hey, like I got a place, you know, neighborhood's all right. I have a feeling this place is going to increase in value in 3 to 5 years. So what I'm going to do is, if you want to live here, I'm not going to crush you on the rent. It's going to pay the mortgage and a little bit then some, just for like, you know, repairs and shit. But I'm not going to crush you on the rent. We're going to go into this as business partners. So in 3 to 5 years, we'll do a lease. We can write up a whole thing, 3 to 5 years. And if, say, I'm correct, and this property does go up in value, and you know, in 3 years, we can reassess our arrangement. And I ultimately say like, hey, I'm going to sell this place, but since you lived here for 3 years, you didn't fuck the place up, you took care of it, you paid me every month, I'm going to give you 10% of the profit I make on this building. It's like a sharecropper. So It's like you can incentivize people who are on the cusp of like because like to me it's like say I made $40,000. That's big money to me. But if I make $30,000, that's big money to me too. But if I make 30 and gave someone 10, that 10's not going to really change my life that much. But that has like transformative effects on a person who's never had 5 figures in their bank account. So the idea is to kind of incentivize people. You know, it's just a take away like the utter like what's the point of, you know, the money suck of having someone rent. And it's like you can kind of be a little more selective, like you know, you can be way more selective and get someone who's like kind of with it rather than someone who just wants to like drain money from this. Just he has no ambition whatsoever. I think it's I personally think it's a nice thing to do. And it's also, for me, it would make me feel a little bit better if I could be in kind of cahoots with the person who's in the building. Like, we're partners on this. Your part is living there, not being a total dickhead and fucking this up. And if you do, then the other thing, too, is that, like, I think, and I totally out of my element, you'd be able to draw something up as a business partnership rather than a tenant-landlord thing. So if they fuck up, they're out. It's like, yeah, and if you do fuck this up, go on. So that's the idea.
Yeah, can I shout out a few things that come to mind?
Yeah.
Okay, so this would be with criminals?
Former, yeah.
Okay. So I think a couple of things. Number one, I definitely think putting incentive is extremely important, 100%. And I think it sounds so unbelievably obvious, but it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, it sounds like common sense, but it's definitely not common practice. Like, I can see it time and time again where, even stuff with, like, let's say my business partner and I, he'll say, like, I don't know why this person didn't do it. I said, well, what incentive did you give them to do it? And he's like, well, we had a conversation. It's like, okay, again, what incentive did you give somebody to do it? So I think incentive is a massive, massive, massive motivator, and making sure incentives are aligned is extremely important. That being said, the first hiccup that I personally see is just real estate in general, where like as a brother, I would tell you, focus on your career, because acquiring real estate, as you know, it's not like, oh, like there's a house, I like it, let's do it, and then transaction's done by tomorrow. It automatically, you can scratch 100 hours off of your year, something like that, most likely. Right. Let's just say, roughly speaking. So what could you do? The opportunity cost is 100 hours of working on your craft and developing that skill set even deeper. Or is it worth it acquiring a property and coming up with this deal with any tenant? And let's even say the deal's not there. So I always find it very, very difficult to justify. Let's even say, like, for myself, very difficult for me to justify taking 100 hours out of my career to acquire a piece of real estate and then to sign myself up for that continual obligation thereafter until I sell the property. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's okay. That can totally work. I mean, and Matt, your family is a perfect example. You've seen how developing or acquiring real estate can build wealth over time. Now, funny thing is that wealth is almost disproportionately perceived because of the optics of it. Right? Like, oh, I can see my 5 houses, and my friends think that I'm exponentially wealthy because of those 5 houses. It's actually no, mathematically, it's very, very, again, this is not formal advice, but mathematically, real estate does not grow very well at all, 3 to 5% over the course of time. Now, you could pick out anomalies, but those are anomalies. Like, you can't plan off of anomalies. Like, Matt, I would say the situation that, if you don't mind me saying, right, like, you purchased an anomaly. It was a phenomenal deal.
Yeah.
Right, like you and Brett, like, that's very likely never to find that again. Like, that is and that's great. You did exactly what you should do. So if I had to say, okay, I'm going to put my chips on Matt, would I put my chips on Matt for developing his craft more of those 100 hours or acquiring a piece of real estate? Well, then you would say, well, Wes, what I'm talking about is a hybrid, right? Now, would you be doing some sort of like therapy with these guys, with the tenant?
No, I mean, I honestly, I didn't really think of it that far in. Because I worked with some of those guys before, and you're talking to them, you're only just doing their paperwork, but you're also like, who are you moving in with? What's your family situation? So you end up doing some sort of like interaction to that degree, but it's no like formal kind of therapy. It's more of like they would call it more like kind of like macro, I guess, work or whatever, or if they even call it that. But you do have a lot of these dudes that come out, like the guys that come out at like 23, 24. It's like, no, because they end up fucking up and get in trouble. The dudes who have been in there for a while, they come out, they're like 37 years old or like 35. They have like a kid or two, and a lot of them come out, and I've seen their pay stubs. I'm like, oh, you've been working for like a year and a half straight. I'm still looking at like you haven't missed a day, blah, blah, blah. So you can find and I had a handful of these dudes who were like very motivated. They were done with all the bullshit. And it was like, they just, they're like, I just want to live and, just not do a bunch of stupid shit. And again, I think the thing I think you're absolutely right about though, too, is like, how I divide my time, because I can do that. I can like jump into things, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh fuck, dude, why did I do this? It's gonna take so much time now. But yeah, it was just an idea I was spitting around, and I think it's something I will end up doing eventually. But yeah, whether or not I do that now or later is definitely the question. But I think personally, I think it's a good model. I think it's a good model.
I think it's great for value to society, 100%.
Yeah.
So if that's more of the motivation, because I know you have that DNA, right? Like you want to help people, and all those, and you specifically have a soft spot in your heart for people coming out of, incarceration, et cetera. That's great. Like, but I wouldn't be doing my job as a friend, or kind of like you're asking for like more of like, okay, like a mathematical decision. Yeah. I wouldn't be doing my job as a friend if I say, okay, here's the math of that. I think you come out ahead. I don't think it's something you should hang your hat on to build a massive amount of wealth. Yeah. But if it gives you purpose, absolutely. I mean, that's, purpose trumps everything else.
That's kind of where I'm thinking. I'm not looking at it as like a, vehicle that's going to launch me into the stratosphere. It's kind of like, all right, I'm going to get hit with taxes at the end of every year. I wanted to try it as like a pilot program to see if it works, and then pitch it to like these other places. Like there's like Gaudenzia. There's a bunch of other places that do this that I've talked to, because that's the only thing too. It's like they always get in fights with these, like exactly like you're saying. They get in fights with the tenants. Landlords don't agree. And it's like, well, dude, you don't go and fix the shit because you think they're going to break it. So you have no incentive to give them a decent house. They have no incentive to take care of your house because there's like genuinely nothing in it for them. You're kind of gouging them the price of the neighborhood. They're on a program, so you raise the it's like I hate that. It's shitty. Yeah. It's like, you have someone, they don't. Like you have a place, you could, make a nice place for people to live, but then it's like, you're like, well, the neighborhood's fucked up, and it's like, yeah, there's no one's incentivized to like, to keep the street, the block they're on good. Whereas if you had like 4 or 5 individuals who are like, no, like my fate's actually tied to this building, and like maybe it'll spark a little bit more kind of like responsibility and kind of like, hey, like get that shit the fuck out of here. But I agree with you. It's like the timing of it, we'll see. It's something I always kind of wanted to do. I kind of wanted to just like tweak the idea of that in terms of the like, because you could, especially with speculative stuff, it's like, I'm not like banking on being like I'm gonna make all this money. It's like I genuinely think it's going to increase a little bit. But I hear what you're saying. There is like it is very much in theory, and I know like, and I've had Ray said, and I have multiple people tell me like, dude, like you rent out a house, and I know this firsthand. It's like, it's not like, oh, I just write a check and that's it. It's you got to do a lot of shit, and it's constant upkeep. You're paying money and just like, painting it between people. So yeah, I'm gonna keep thinking about it and kick it around. But that's something I have on the horizon just for a pilot. I'm gonna try just one house and see how it goes with one person.
Yeah, hell yeah, man, do it. I mean, I can tell you that I've got clients in. What do? They do, I think it's technically halfway houses. Yeah. And they do something, it's something weird. Like, they own the houses, but then they have contracts with, I don't know, whether it's the government or some other organization that pays for these people's rent. And, there's 4 or 5 adults to a house. And they have done extremely well, right? Because at that point, it's not real estate. It's you own the real estate, but it's more of a business inside of the real estate. But they do it full time. It's not a typical landlord situation. No,
those things, they're full. That's a full time endeavor, man. But yeah, and I also, Ray, to answer your question, I told Brady the idea as well. She was very much against it, but I sold her. I did sell her on it. So we'll see. I'm going to kind of talk to a few more places that like who I used to be in touch with, because I don't want to, again, I'm not, the good thing I would say, and I think this group helps me with this tremendously, of not just like jumping into things blindly. Like I'm being a lot more discerning, but it would be nice. It would be nice to have that as more, that's more, to me, it's more tenable than rent to own. It's like, look, we're both taking risks. I'm obviously, if I lose money, I'm not going to hold you responsible, but there's a little something in this for you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with aligning interest. And then to the other part, I would say, like, look at what you've done, even in the last like year and a half. I would look at all of the projects that you're doing, and they all dovetail into like your core unique abilities. Do you know what I mean? Like every project I hear you doing, like reading, writing, creating videos, doing podcasting, stand-up, like they all dovetail into like your nucleus skill set. And the real estate thing, I think, is just a tiny bit of separation to where like I can't connect the dots fully, and that's okay. Yeah. But now you have this island out here that has no bridge, and that's okay. But then we get to like kind of like the you're starting from scratch here versus you're building such a big snowball over here where everything's feeding into one another.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, that makes a lot of sense, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I totally agree with what you're saying. It's like, This is the problem I always had with, like, when I was in social work and they would talk about, like, when people were like, oh, I'm an ally, I'm a, like, to whoever, like gay people, like minorities, whatever. But a lot of that, and I wrote a paper about this, how, like, they use that term and it's like that, it sounds nice, but in class, like, it's like the term ally, I guess they mean a friend. And if someone's your friend and they're like, they won't tell you certain things that they come up as like flags, they're not your friend. They're someone who's like, just kind of latched onto you for some weird reason, or they're just afraid of you, which maybe your personality's too much. But it's like, yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's very important to, like, keep that aspect in all relationships of, like, yeah, I hear you, but I don't know about that one, bro. So yeah. I'd always appreciate that.
And by the way, like, there's something I learned a few years ago. It's like my business coach told me, is like, if you want something, you want it. You want it because you want it. You do not have to justify to anybody why you want something. So I'm certainly saying if that's of interest to you, then fucking do it.
Yeah.
But if the question is, do I see it like do I see it being optimized relative to what you're building now? I see a disconnect.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It might be like, even like Ray's saying, it might be something I can do. I might not just be there yet to start tinkering with, like, my social projects, because I do want to do that at some point, something like that. But yeah, it might be just a little bit kind of down on the horizon.
Awesome. Well, hell yeah, man. I think you should do it. Whenever you get the itch to do it, I think you should do it.
Nice.
Worst case scenario, you learn from one and you don't want to do it again. You sell the property and you're all good. You've got a hedge downside.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. I would do it on something that doesn't, like, I'm not like up to my neck in debt, like, fuck. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Cool, man. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a unique idea, and I think it aligns incentives, which I think is needed more in capitalism, aligning of incentives.
That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, yeah, like, cause they're going to have to figure something out that's different than the kind of, like, and sign up now for, you're ultimately disappointed. And, like, it's like, I think there's a way to create wealth that's kind of that, and again, it's not like this shit of, like, bureaucratic places just, like, doling out money to anybody, but, like, aligning incentive and having people kind of, like, butter the bread a little bit more for everybody. But again, the people who I feel like deserve it by what they're doing, rather than this idea of, like, well, everyone should have this and that. And it's like, I mean, yeah, there's the idea, and we can get onto this for a second, but I watched this guy. He was this Russian guy, and he used to work for the KGB, and he was talking all about how, like, how he worked as a KGB, he worked for the Russian government in order to propagandize people. He's like, that was my job, that's what I did. And he, without getting too into it, he the one thing I thought was interesting, he talks about America, and he goes, you guys are fed the myth that, like, you're all equal. He's like, it sounds cool, but he's like, along what metrics? He's like, how are you equal? He's like, so if I do this and you do that, are we still equal? He's like, and obviously there's, like, the assumption, like, we're equal as human beings and have a certain amount of dignity we deserve. And
sure.
I think everyone agrees with that for the most part. But then he goes, but he's like, the problem is like, everyone does different stuff. And if I do this and you do that, and I'm doing something, like, good and you're doing something bad, then we're not equal along that line of dimension. You can, put it all.
Sure.
So it is interesting. That is something that I find really interesting. People buying into that, like, like, we should have free housing for everyone. I'm like, fuck yeah, that'd be cool. But then it's like, are you going to come out of pocket for it? And like, well, no.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, how can you think of a way to improve things, but not be naive about it?
Oh, dude. Well, this is why I feel, I don't know. Part of me wants to say that I think the school system should be adjusted to where everything except for a select few topics, not topics, what do they call it? Like math, science, reading, everything except for a few subjects should be non-graded and should be, like, almost taught in an entertaining type of way. So for instance, like, when I've watched so much more History Channel stuff than I ever paid attention to, like, in a history class.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I learned so much more. I was never graded on any of the stuff that I watched on the History Channel or Discovery Channel. Never.
Yeah.
However, so I think that'll free up some of the stress and the homework bandwidth for students to purely focus on reading, writing, and math. Particularly for me, understanding statistics and basic arithmetic. Because the argument that you just said, Matt, the amount of conversations that I've had with people who you can't have a conversation with them because they don't understand basic statistics and arithmetic. Not even capitalism, just basic math.
Yeah.
You can't do it, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, give everybody free housing. Okay. explain where that comes from. Like just take 10 minutes or 5 minutes and explain to me the sequence of events that would happen where that could be sustainable for everybody. Let's even say you had a tribe of 10 people. Tell me how that works in 10 people, let alone 300 million. Like, how does that work? You know, and they can't do it. They're like, oh, no, they get frustrated. Like, oh, no, it doesn't matter. Like, it's like, no, just tell me. Oh, you can't tell me because you haven't spent the time thinking through it.
Yeah, man. I mean, dude, it's it's one of those things. I mean, it's like, because you can look at it and go, well, we have the resources, and it's like, all right, well, we do need people to dedicate their lives and time to building these houses. Are you going to build these houses?
Exactly.
I don't know how to build houses, and it's like, okay.
Yep.
So you're going to have to go convince people who know how to build houses that they should stop what they're doing and build all these other people's houses, which again, it's like, yeah, we could all stop. We could all take a pause and we could all, share food and eat. Okay, cool. But it's like, are you going to do it? Or are you going to continue like, well, I'm going to continue trying to get ahead, but I think this would be nice for other people to do. And it's like, okay. That was the other thing too, man. It's like everyone, and then as it goes up the ladder too, it's like you get people who, like I knew people who were pretty wealthy, especially, I'm always going back to like when I was in Bryn Mawr, because that was kind of like a culture shock for me. But it's like you get even these professors, they're like, 60 years old, man, they're paid. They're out. You don't have to do the math. They're living out on the main line. They got, they have enough money to be doing all this other stuff. Like, I have, I do this. I come and teach here for, just because I like it, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, so you're papered. You got 4 kids. You're living out in a place where like the property taxes are probably $20,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And they're always like, yeah, but these people need to share more of their money. And I'm like, it's always the people who just have a little more money than you who are the greedy ones. Mm-hmm. It's like, so, and the thing is, I really agree with like I think people should be more engaged in like just some, like, do you have some form of value contribution you do just because it feels good, in general. Like you were saying, Wes, like I was down here, my wife was gone at nighttime. I could have done anything. I could have down here, I could have like played Grand Theft Auto, which, I've now that like I wanted to get these meditation videos out, seems just kind of like I just have absolutely no time for it. But it's like I could have like watched a movie, I could have done all these things, but I genuinely enjoy doing this like meditate. Like I love it, dude. I love making them. So it's like that becomes your weekend nights, and I'm like tickled pink to do that and go to bed. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do agree with you too. It's like you got to be kind of discerning with like what exactly you're pouring yourself into, and not trying to dilute yourself. That's something I'm really struggling with, like not diluting myself with like a billion projects and trying to like focus on what I actually want to do. Yep.
No, 100%. And just to piggyback off the topic, this is why I love money. Right? I don't love money for unhealthy reasons. Money's just fascinating to me because it shows you where you're voting. Right? It's a unit of exchange as to the perceived value of something. So you can tell me all day long over dinner, or not you, but somebody else, tell me all day long over dinner what they believe in, but then, and how about all these things, they're going to right all these wrongs, and then they just paid $80 for a steak, right? Like, it's your perceived, it's your perception of value, and then you match that perception with the units of transfer of dollars. That's it. Mm-hmm. Like that's the majority of what it is. So you can tell me all these things, but when I look at your bank account, where are you spending your time and where you're spending your money? I could probably guess your reality within like 5% accuracy, right? Like where you truly believe, because Jordan Peterson's like, it's like, is how do you live? Like you live how you believe, not how you speak, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, true. Yeah, man, it is interesting, man, to like really sift through kind of what people say versus what they do, and also apply it to yourself. It's like, I'm constantly checking myself on like, how accurate is this? How much, is this something I'm actually doing, and blah, 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 blah. But mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's something to be reconciled with. And I do think, in kind of a zoomed out perspective, people are going to have to figure out something other than the current system we're currently working in, just because of like the scarcity of natural resources and blah, blah, blah. And, mm-hmm. Kind of going forward in that regard. But yeah, it'll get interesting, man. I'm looking forward to it in terms of like people start kind of aligning more through the internet versus like local municipalities and all that stuff. And mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But again, you go back to the fundamentals, and it's like you've said before, no matter what kind of political landscape occurs, none of it matters unless like, are you creating value? And if
exactly
enough people aren't creating value, no system works. So
correct.
It's like that's the fucking long and short of it, man. Oh, I'm gonna get this guy in office. I'm gonna get this guy in office. Blah 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 blah. It's like, dude, are you creating value? Those guys, that'll just all fall apart if people stop creating, if people do not continue to create value.
Without a doubt.
Be connected to the place they're in some way, shape, or form, whether it's just your family or whatever. But that to me kind of cuts through all the other, like, well, I think this, I think that. It's like, yeah, what do you actually do?
Yeah. Oh, well, definitely. I mean, the majority of people who make comments like the ones that we're referring to are generally decreasing their value. Like, they're on the decreasing path of value to society. So it's convenient that they have these arguments of like, oh, money's bullshit and all this stuff. It's like, well, that's because you're not producing the reciprocated amount of value back into society. So of course you're going to make the arguments that like money's a hoax, money, blah, blah, blah. But if you think about it, it's like if you and I were neighbors, and this is a classic case in economics. If you and I were neighbors and I made really good hats for the winter, and winter's coming, and you have goats, well, you would say, hey, Wes, like my family, I got a family, I'm Irish Catholic, and I've got 13 kids, and it's going to take you an excessive amount of time.
Kind of racist, but go ahead.
It's gonna take you an excessive amount of time to make hats and scarves and mittens for my family. And I would say, Matt, there's no problem. And you'd say, well, what can I give to you? And you'd say, well, I've got goats. And I say, well, I don't, I'm good on my goats. I've got enough goats as well, blah, blah, blah. Or, I'm vegan, whatever, right? Like,
sure.
You'd say, okay, well, how about I give you these little promises that say like these pieces of paper are good for it to go. Instead of me giving you goats, these little pieces of paper will buy you whatever you want in the local town, right? That is a phenomenal transaction. It's like, oh, okay, because now I can go and get something that I need, not a goat, and it allows you to get what you want.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's actually an incredibly respectful thing. In fact, if you asked me, or if I asked you to make me and my entire family hats, mittens, and scarves without any exchange, there's only so many favors before the favors run out. Yeah. At a certain point, it becomes disrespectful for me to ask you, because you're taking away time from your own family, right, to help out my family. There has to be a unit of exchange. If there's not, right, like, how does that work? Somebody please explain to me how that works. It doesn't work.
I think it was you who was saying, and there's like those tribal societies everyone kind of holds up as like, yeah, like, Native Americans, they had like a longhouse that had just like all the stuff everybody kind of needed. But it's, oh, that sounds so cool. But the flip side, I think you were saying, is like, one time the guy just turned around and just murdered a guy. I was like, yeah, he wasn't. And I've read stuff myself where it's like they would like push dudes off a cliff. If you're lollygagging on the hunt, they'd be like, all right, here, come over here, boom, get the fuck out of here. We don't need dudes like you. So it's like, that's the fucking part of it. Y'all want to, it's like, we should just share everything. It's like, we could do that, but if I catch you lollygagging, I also can throw you off a fucking cliff.
Yep.
And it's like, do you want to live in that world? Because it's like there's no, we kind of escaped from nature. We civilized ourselves out of nature, and it's like nature's a scary, scary, scary place. So yeah, I always tell people to like, I think we should always be kind of trying to retool society and figure out how to re-optimize it, because I feel like that's what everyone's been. That's what's got us to this point, and it can always get better. But yeah, dude, letting people lose the the naiveness about it, naivete, whatever it's called. That's a big one. That's just part of growing up. They call it there's a guy, Glenn Lowry, I watched. He calls getting mugged by reality. He always talks about that. He goes, yeah, he's like a conservative economist, and he's always like, liberals getting mugged by reality. Like, you're like, yeah, and you turn 30, 40, have kids, and you go, oh, okay, I could see this. I can see what they're saying here. But,
oh, yeah.
And dude, the thing Gibbons said, I love it. I don't know where the quote's from. He said, does your audio match your video? Love that quote. Fucking love that, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, dude, the reality is human beings were extremely complex, and it's kind of simple at the same time. But because there's, in general communication, there's not a quantifiable unit of exchange, we're left to abstractions and estimations that are usually massively off. When you bring in capitalism, they start to get very much calibrated. Right, like, hey, I just made this hat. What do you think of it, Matt? Like, oh, Wes, I think it's a great hat. Okay, will you pay me $500 for it? Crickets. Do you know what I mean? Okay, will you pay me $50 for it? Crickets. Will you pay me $10 for it? Crickets. Right. So we got to get very accurate on what you actually think is valuable, and that's the bitch of it. And through that process, that's where people can become bitter. But the cool thing is, once you learn that process and you get really, really good at your craft, then it becomes seamless. And that's how you build wealth. That's the real way of building wealth. It's like, oh, I got really good at finding what this select group of people really want, and I got so good at it, right, that they are willing to pay me their hard-earned dollars in exchange for my hard-earned labor.
Yeah, man. I mean, dude, again, I think that that really is kind of the, whatever the word is, fulcrum of like what everything rests on. It's like, are you, are you producing something that people want? And it's also like, what are the shortcuts that it's a tall order, especially as time goes by. And you're like, oh yeah. It's like, just find out from a young age. And this is what I'm really going to encourage Maya, and if I have other kids as well, I'm going to be really on them. Not so much about like, the kind of like, make sure you do this, make sure you do that, but I'm going to be hammering them figuring out what they're into. Like, what do you like to do? And like, dude, if you can just figure out something you're into, it's the absolute turbo boost. Because you're just I like this. And then you just get better. Like, because I think we get kind of psyoped here into thinking like you must suffer like enormously and then you'll be rewarded, which, again, that does happen. But it's like, it's not totally necessary. It's like, of course, you should be able to endure some suffering. You can't like run away from it all the time. But it's like, you can do something you like and just kind of be kind of content. Like you can do that. It's just kind of scary for people.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, there's a suffering that every creator, that every artist has, and that's a suffering of trying to create. That's a different type of suffering than like, I don't know how to create and I need to figure out how to feed myself. That's a whole, like, you don't want to be in that category. Like, that is a bad category to be in. But you should use that to motivate you to get out of that category, not make excuses as to why you are in that category.
Yes, exactly, man.
And speaking from somebody who's come from that category, like, I'm not being disrespectful to people who are in there. Like, I can speak to it because I've been there. But there's no excuses, right? Like, it gets back to the same thing. Create value for others. Yeah,
it quashes the bullshit. Like you were saying, that kind of, that it quashes the bullshit big time. It's actually kind of a good litmus test. It's like, would you still be worried about this if you were like pretty hungry? It's like, no, not really.
100%, man.
But yeah, dude. Well, dude, it's 12. I have I think my babysitter's leaving.
Spot on.
Yeah. What are you trying to get done this week? Everyone toss it in.
Yep. So I finished my next script for the next finance video, and then Rhomas, that I'm not giving up on that.
Yes.
Like, until we fucking get it done.
Hell yeah, man. Cool. This week I'm going to. My goal is to have I think I do. I have the script of the second level of meditation done in terms of like, exactly the key points I want to hit. But I want to get that totally polished and recorded, just the audio this week. That's my main goal. Other than that, it's just kind of, again, just doing the stuff that's kind of keeping everything on and moving with like podcasts and all that. So
nice. Sweet.
Yeah, man.
All right, dudes. We'll see you all on Friday.
All right. Later on.